Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience Podcast. Mike has over 31 years experience in real estate, finance, and investing. He's passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
So what can you expect from the Mike Litton Experience? You can expect stories that will inspire, motivate, advice that will sharpen your focus, and expert information on real estate, finance, and market conditions. Scott Mann, thank you so much for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. Like we talked about before we hit record, everybody has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. So with your permission, we're going to start with where you were born, go all the way up to today. And then we want to talk about your books. We want to talk about Operation Pineapple Express. We want to talk about your play. We want to talk about your new book that's coming out. It's called Nobody Is Coming to Save You, right? Yep. I'm halfway through it. Like I shared with you before we hit record, I'm halfway through it and I'm loving every second of it. You are onto something here. And I want to make sure that we delve into that too. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah. Awesome. Good to be here.
Thanks so much for being here, bud.
Yeah, man. Absolutely.
So where were you born?
I was born in Clifton Forge, Virginia.
Okay.
I'm a child of the Appalachians. My family, my father, my mother, all from Asheville, North Carolina.
Okay.
And my dad was a U.S. forester and wildland firefighter for 42 years. So we moved in these little logging towns all over the South and Southeast. And so I was born in a single wide trailer in Clifton Forge, Virginia, and we moved rapidly. I didn't stay there very long. We lived in a couple places in Georgia, a couple places in Arkansas and Mississippi, but ultimately where I spent most of my youth, Mike, was in a little logging town, farming town in Arkansas called Mount Ida.
Okay.
And to this day, the population is still less than 1,000. I had 36 people in my graduating class, and we still don't have a stoplight.
Wow. Not even a stoplight.
No. And we go back there. We go back there every single summer because there's this beautiful lake there. If you were ever, I don't know if I should give this away, but if you were ever looking to go to a freshwater lake, that is the ultimate. It's Lake Ouachita. It's just outside Mount Ida near Hot Springs. And it's like, I don't know how many thousands of miles. There's no houses on the shoreline. It's all uninterrupted shoreline. It's all government land.
Wow.
But we go back there every summer and we take my 3 boys back there. And we just spend like 10 days on a houseboat in the cove, man. And it is one of the most amazing places on earth, Mount Ida.
I love it. That's one of the prettiest places on the planet, I think.
Yeah.
When I was growing up in Oklahoma, we would vacation out in the Ozarks, it was the Lake of the Ozarks, all that. It was really a cool place.
It really is. They call it the natural state for a reason.
Yeah. And it's a lot different than where I grew up, which is, the plains and flat and all that kind of stuff, completely different topography and the whole thing. So 100%. I love the mountains, obviously. So, lots of trees. So loved it. So growing up where you grew up, what was your favorite thing about growing up there?
I would say the woods. I was very much kind of an introvert and very kind of an outside looking in kind of kid. I was, bullied somewhat and just I had trouble sometimes fitting in. And where we lived at the ranger station was just miles of woods. And I could go out in the woods and just disappear and play by myself and play army and fight every battle from the War of 1812 to, the Battle of the Bulge and not come home until supper time, man. It was just, I loved it. I loved being out in the woods. And also, I mean, I'll have to say the sense of community that was there, you really, I look back on it now and it was that powerful sense of community that was always made you feel safe.
Yeah. I love that story about you being in the soda shop and the Green Beret walked in.
It's true. Yeah. I mean, I decided to become a Green Beret when I was 14.
Yeah.
Because of a guy named Mark, who his dad was the owner of the soda shop. And I met him, and it just immediately knew this because of what this guy did. He was, first of all, he was cool enough to sit down with me at this run of a kid. And whenever, you know, because there was a lot of people in there, and he spent time with me. It was as if he saw in me the desire to do what it was he was telling me about, and he could see it 14 years later, you know. And I never forgot that, because he was so impactful, so influential on me, and planted such a dream in my mind and heart by sharing that time with me about what Green Berets do, and how they work by, with, and through Indigenous people, and help them stand up on their own, and how they immerse in the language and the culture, and help the little guy stand up against the big guy. All that stuff was just fired me up, and I never forgot it. I obsessed and prepared and trained from that point forward, and he really stayed as a mentor in my life until I retired decades later.
Yeah. Do you mind if I share something with you?
No, I'd love it.
I want to acknowledge him for this reason. I think he helped shape the person you are today.
Oh, for sure.
Your desire for service, your desire to help, your absolute passion to improve people's lives around you. I'm getting emotional, but you know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Your desire to connect and reach out and help people and pay it forward started that day.
Oh, for sure.
It was a big deal. And
it was.
I just think it's incredibly important that we acknowledge him and what he did and the impact he had on you. And I think it's also important that we acknowledge that we all need to do that.
Yeah.
We all need to take a second. You know, he might not have had that much time that day.
Right.
But he sat with you and he made a major impact that changed your life. We can all do that, Scott, if we just take a second, you know,
absolutely,
and stay in curiosity and get to know who it is we're talking to and figure out how we can help.
Yeah. You never know how the stories you tell and how the stories you ask to hear are going to impact somebody, you know, years down the line, or, you know, in a secondary and tertiary way. And what I can tell you with Mark, you know, I was 14. I mean, there was nothing, and I was about as unassuming and underwhelming a kid as you could possibly imagine. I probably weighed, you know, 85 pounds soaking wet. And, you know, at that time in my life, a very awkward time in my life at 14, and this, you know, where most of the kids in that town were big corn-fed logging boys, you know, and I really struggled to fit in, man. And even when I decided to do the special forces thing in high school, I would train for it and, you know, do the best. People, my nickname in that town was Rambo, because I was so the opposite of it. You know, I literally looked like this just scrawny runt. But Mark never saw that. He never, whenever he talked to me like he was talking to a peer. And he talked to me like, when you're a team leader, this is what you're going to want to focus on. And he never once indicated that it was anything other than what was going to happen in my life. And the mentors in my life who have always been transformational to me, that's how they spoke to me. And I hear you loud and clear, and I appreciate you calling it out, because to this day, if a young person contacts me about joining special ops, I will literally cancel everything on my calendar to talk to that young person, because that's exactly what happened with me. And had Mark not done that, I don't know what would have happened.
Yeah. And it's, you know, it permeates. It permeates in everything you're about.
Yeah.
Operation Pineapple Express,
Yeah.
Last Out, your new book, everything that I have, every bit of exposure I've had to you, including our conversation before we hit record here, literally that's who you are. That's who you are. And it's awesome, man. It's awesome.
There's a rule in storytelling, in the hero's journey, when you write your story, that in almost every hero's journey framework, there's always a guide who shows up, an Obi-Wan Kenobi. And it's really important that when we share our stories, our backstories with people, that we always tip the hat to that guide that showed up in our life and made that difference. And whether that was a parent or a teacher or even a book that we read, when you build your story, my experience has been 9 times out of 10, there'll be a guide that appeared right when we needed them to get us where we needed to be.
Yeah. And that person, honestly, might not have had time that day. They made time to do it.
Yeah.
Right. They're typically busy. They typically have other things on their mind. They have other things going on, but they pull you aside because they see you going in a direction you shouldn't be going in, or there's a better direction, right? Don't go this way, you know, kind of thing. and it only takes a few minutes and it changes your life. I look back on my life, there are all kinds of people that took the time, they stopped and they took the time and they saw potential in me that I didn't even see. Kind of like
Yeah.
what you're talking about, right? It's amazing. So I feel like it's incredibly important that we share with people
Yeah.
that it's incredibly important to pay it forward. So
It is.
I appreciate you letting me do that.
Yeah.
So growing up, who was the most influential person to you?
It had to be my dad.
Yeah.
I mean, you and I were talking before we hit record on, you were talking about how your dad is like the coolest dude. And you spend 10 minutes with him and you want to
Yeah.
just take him home and have a beard. That is my father, Rex, man. I talk a lot about him pretty much in every TED talk I've done, my book. He's in Pineapple. He's in Nobody's Coming to Save You. He was, to me, he and is just the quintessential leader, because of how he conducted himself. In 56 years of being on this earth, he never raised his voice to me. 56 years. And let me tell you, I gave him every reason to, but he didn't. He never raised his voice to me, and was just the most, and he was a wildland firefighter. He fought those massive fires out in California and Oregon. And I can remember going to his retirement after 42 years of doing that. And there were so many people at the banquet hall where they were retiring. They had to have televisions out in the wings so that people could people came from Montana and just to pay their respects. And this guy, he's my ranger buddy, man. He has this saying that's in my book. Actually, he says, our obligation in life is to leave our tracks, to leave tracks in our legacy. And without a doubt, that guy has been the most influential person in my life. A close second is my mom, but my dad, definitely, right in there.
Yeah. Gotcha. That's awesome. In high school, did you have a favorite subject?
History, 100%. History. Yeah. My history teacher, Mr. Loki, was a Vietnam veteran.
Oh.
And he was an infantryman, and he was drafted, and he was very opposite of what I wanted to be. He was not one of these that he believed in the military. He had actually kind of lost he had lost a lot of affection for the country in the sense of service, and because of what had happened to him in Vietnam and friends he had lost. And he still loved the country, but he believed that service actually was potentially dangerous if we weren't careful, and if it wasn't handled responsibly. And but yet with all that, he was such a patient, kind man, and he was a master of history and such a great storyteller. And his reluctance of violence and his disdain for violence because of what he had seen always came across so genuinely. And he didn't try to discourage me from becoming a Green Beret, but he always just would caution me that what I was going to do was a very, very big decision, and that it bore a lot of responsibility, and that one of the biggest responsibilities was to have a good command of civics and history, so that I could do the right thing when challenged. And boy, was he right.
Yeah, no kidding. No kidding. So in high school, did you play any sports?
I did. I played, I was small, but my dad was small also. I played football until junior high. I played basketball all the way through high school. I loved basketball. I played baseball. It was one of those schools that was so small that it wasn't uncommon to see during halftime, the marching band, half the band were in football pads.
Yeah.
Because
they didn't have time to change.
Yeah. Well, everybody had to play multiple positions, in the school. So yeah, those were my two big sports, were baseball and basketball. Love
With a graduating class of 36, it doesn't surprise me.
Oh man, 36 people, and we sports were a big part of that little high school that I went to. But it was, you had to play a couple of sports just to keep the teams filled.
Sure, absolutely. That was a requirement, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So after you graduate high school, where do you go?
I went to the University of Central Arkansas in Conway, Arkansas, on an ROTC scholarship.
Okay.
I already knew I wanted to be a special forces team leader.
Mhm.
And, just to kind of wind it back, what had really infatuated me with special forces Mike, was this notion of the little guy, or the big guy standing up for the little guy, and giving a voice from kind of the inside out, the bottom up, that grassroots kind of thing. And all of those interpersonal skills, and just being a combat advisor seemed so amazing to me. And so I had it mapped out. I had done all kinds of research. I had talked to different Green Berets who came in and out of the town. So the scholarship for me was a natural progression to go get my commission. Yeah. And as soon as I was commissioned, then I would be able to go and spend like 4 years in the Army before I was eligible to try out for Special Forces as a captain. But I had it all mapped out. And so Central Arkansas was where I went, a few hours down from my house. But then my folks moved. I don't think I was prepared for that. They moved to Kentucky. Dad got transferred, and I decided to stay. I stayed at the University of Central Arkansas. And I don't think I've talked much about that, but that actually was when I started to experience, for the first time, I think, a lot of loneliness. We were very poor. We didn't have a lot of money. So college was pretty challenging. Yeah. And I started drinking a lot. And I started, while I was in ROTC performing at a very high level, I started to party and drink, and started my path toward alcoholism, very early on, going to college kind of solo, hundreds of miles from where my folks were, and just kind of wallowed in that, So by the time I graduated college, yes, I was a commissioned officer and ready to go in the Army, but I also was a raging alcoholic.
Yeah. Masking a lot of pain,
a lot of fear.
Yeah.
And a lot of imposter syndrome, still a really scrawny, small person, and just trying to convince myself that I could go, be a commando. And it was, sometimes I could do that and sometimes I couldn't, but the booze always helped me, convince myself that I could.
Gives you confidence.
Yeah. So I was
false
commissioned
confidence, but confidence.
Yeah, false confidence.
Right.
Commissioned in May of 91, and then launched off to the Republic of Panama for my first duty station.
Wow. What was that like?
It was great, actually. There was a stop at Ranger School after I got commissioned, and that was not a fun. I think I recycled that school like 3 times. It's a very, very difficult school where they take away your food and your sleep, and it's a real test of, they take away your rank, and you've got to lead in these really arduous conditions. And I got recycled 3 times, and I finally made it on the last time. It was my last shot. And then so I went to Panama as a newly tabbed Ranger student, kind of full of myself. And it was shortly after Just Cause. Like, it was just a year or two after Just Cause had happened in the war in Panama. So it was a really weird vibe down there. There was still a lot of kind of like just below the surface. There was a lot of fear and anxiety around the American presence. And we were leaving. We had already announced we were leaving.
And distrust. There was distrust too. A lot of the people in Panama felt betrayed by Just Cause. They felt betrayed by what happened. And a lot of them were, a lot of people don't realize or don't remember how popular Noriega was. He wasn't popular with his enemies, right? But he was popular with the people.
Right. And frankly, this is one of the first things exposures that I had to Special Forces was, and not many people know this, but during the invasion of Panama, it was a pretty big armada of U.S. forces that went down there. There's the 7th Infantry Division, the 82nd, the Marines, the Rangers, the SEALs. Yeah. But there was also a battalion of Special Forces who lived in Panama. They actually were stationed down there from 7th Special Forces Group. And when the invasion happened, and immediately the capital fell, the Comandancia fell, and then most of the soldiers that remained were out in the rural quartels, and they were not surrendering because they were terrified. So the Joint Task Force was going to launch a massive operation to go clear the rural areas, kind of a search and destroy.
Right.
And the local Green Berets, there was a Major Higgins and a couple of senior non-commissioned officers who walked into the task force headquarters and said, "Look, we live here. Yeah. If we do this, we are going to be cleaning up the mess in Panama for the next 2 decades.
Yeah.
Give us a short amount of time. And we work with these guys all the time. We speak their language. We can get them to surrender."
Yeah.
And so one of the I think it was a Ranger task force commander, looked at him and said, "You have 36 hours."
Wow.
So they put together this plan, and basically I'll summarize it, and they did it all over the country. But Major Higgins and a couple of SF guys from his unit, they flew up to the Cherokee province, which is way up north, massive cartel of soldiers up there. And they landed, and now remember, this is before cell phones, this is before the internet.
Yeah.
So they landed up there, and they dismounted the choppers. They landed fairly close to where the Comandancia was. They walked over to, because this was during the holidays, they walked over to a local elementary school, and they went to a payphone, and they had like dimes, and he put dimes in the phone to call. No, I'm not kidding.
Oh my goodness.
To call the Comandancia, and the phone didn't work. So he turns to this guy on the bench that's reading a paper, and he says, do you know where there's another phone? He said, it's inside the school, but the school's locked. And he said, oh man, and he's like, trying to figure it out. He goes, but I'm the janitor, I can let you in.
Oh wow.
He opens the school up. The company commander goes in there, gets on the phone in the principal's office, dials the comandante, tells him in Spanish, basically, hey, it's me. We're 5 kilometers from where you are. We're going to fly over, have all of your men in parade formation, weapons stacked, and we will let everybody go. There will be no, and you can keep your sidearms.
Right.
So there was a little bit of hesitancy, and he said, and if you don't, you know me, I would not lie to you. The 82nd Airborne is coming.
Yeah.
So
they're right behind us.
Yeah. So these guys jumped in choppers, and I remember this staff sergeant in Special Forces who had just come from the Rangers. When I interviewed him, he was telling me, he said, I could not believe what we were about to do. We get on these choppers, and we think we're flying into a buzzsaw. And when they fly over, there's the entire armada of this Comandancia that are in dress, parade rest, weapons stacked. They land the helicopters. They formally take the surrender. And those ended up being, because they kept their sidearms, they ended up becoming the Panamanian National Police.
Wow.
They secured infrastructure. And so that worked, and they rinsed and repeated that all over Panama. They affected the entire surrender of the Panamanian National Defense Forces without a shot fired after the capital fell, and they called it Operation Ma Bell.
Unreal.
Right? And
unreal.
So that was one of the first stories I got. I know. And as an SF guy, as an aspiring officer who wanted to be SF and who came to Panama, I got to hear that story directly from the mouths of the men who executed it, who were still in Panama. And it deeply, deeply affected me, because I thought, okay, that is what I want to be. Yeah. That is what I want to do. And those guys could have been stone cold killers too, because they are. But they only employ that technique when they have to. I tell people a modern day Green Beret, and I say this in the book, is a combination of John Wick, Lawrence of Arabia, and the Verizon guy.
Yeah.
These relationship-based connectors. And in this very occasion, they knew that it made much more sense to leverage rapport and trust than to go in slinging lead.
Yeah.
And the last thing I'll say on that, Mike, is if you want to know what that led to, a few years ago when my boys were still in high school, I took them to Panama. My wife and I, we rented an SUV, and we drove all over the entire country of Panama, unhindered, unmolested, and we were able to go. People welcomed us everywhere we went. And I like to think that that was a direct contribution of the forward thinking of a couple of Green Berets who chose an unconventional approach to maintaining social capital when it was easy to just sling lead.
Yeah, and they could still be fighting down there.
100%. And think about the level of resentment and subversion that could be in place there. And instead, Panama to this day is a very, very staunch ally. Yeah. We still maintain a lot of influence around the canal. And I saw this. That wasn't the only time I would see that, but I never forgot it. Operation Ma Bell was burned into my memory.
That's awesome, man. I love that. So you're in Panama, and then at some point you end up becoming a Green Beret. Talk about that for a second.
Yeah. So I was actually commissioned as a logistician. I was a quartermaster.
Okay.
And I did not want to do that. I was a terrible supply guy. Plus I was a raging drunk. So I almost lost my career multiple times, fighting downtown, and I was a wreck. I was a terrible officer, so my leadership was actually happy to see me go to selection. In fact, the deputy commander of the forces in Panama, I met him on a fishing trip of all things, because he was from Alabama, And he immediately liked me. And I think he also saw that I was in the process of ruining my career before I ever got to SF.
Oh, wow.
So this guy took a chance on me and actually made me his aide de camp. And I was the biggest piece of crap. He made me his aide. And he said to me, Scott, if I'm going to make you my aide, you're going to be on jump status. And if you perform for me the way you should and the way I know you're capable of doing, I will put you, when you're done with this job, I'll put you in the Special Operations Support Unit until you go to selection, and you can hang out with Green Berets in Panama until you assess.
Wow.
And that changed.
That works.
Absolutely. On a dime.
Yeah.
I shaped up.
Yeah.
I shaped up and I became the aide de camp that he needed me to become. I got my crap together. I still drank, but I really worked on it. It would come back later, but I really got focused. Mm-hmm. And to his word, he put me in a special ops support unit in Panama. And that's where I spent the rest of my time as a senior lieutenant, Mike, getting ready for selection. And I was surrounded by these iconic Green Beret sergeants who are like, wow, okay, we've got this young officer here who wants to come to our unit. Mm-hmm. Let's do it right. Let's get him ready. And they did. They poured themselves into me. They gave me workout programs. They would take me shooting. By the time I went to selection, I was already fully corrupted as a Green Beret officer. Yeah. I was ready to go.
You know, we need to acknowledge him. That was a leadership deal, because Absolutely. You were headed down this rabbit hole, right? You were headed down this place of no return.
Yeah.
And he saw it.
Yeah.
And he also saw that you had a passion for doing this, and he ends up giving you a hand up, right? Right? And,
yes, absolutely.
And you responded to it, and all of a sudden you had something to aspire to, because when you were in supply, as like you said, in logistics, you were just floundering, right? Yeah. You were like in the swirl, so to speak, right? Yeah. And this is somebody who paid it forward.
Absolutely.
Right?
100%.
And had a major impact. I mean, you are who you are today because of that decision that he made. That's leadership, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's leadership. And you got a chance to see it live and in color.
And he took a real chance on me.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I was clearly a risk, and he took a real chance on me. And it was a major turning point in my life. And he absolutely was, Jimmy Simpkins was something special. I'll tell you what.
That's awesome, man. That is awesome. Yeah. So you become a Green Beret. Tell us what that's like.
It is, of all of there are a lot of special operators in the inventory. And I always try to start with that. And they are all fantastic at what they do. You have the Marine special ops, you have the SEALs, you have the Rangers, you have Delta, and there's others, air commandos. Green Berets, as we're nicknamed, special forces. What it was like was exactly what I dreamed it would be as a 14-year-old kid. Wow. It was maybe better. And the reason was because you were in this organization whose mission is to wage unconventional warfare by working by, with, and through indigenous people.
Right.
So everything that you do, you have to, again, I go back to those three avatars, and I'm not just being flippant. Like the John Wick, you had to be surgically coercive. You had to be extremely good at martial skills. And that just was your baseline. Like that was understood that you had, and you had to be very surgical in your ability to apply that, and very judicious, to be able to take shots inside a community where the preponderance of the population is who you need to be working with. Right. Yeah. And there's one bad actor swimming amongst them. How do you surgically go after that individual? Like that's right. So and then there's the Lawrence of Arabia thing. Lawrence Arabia was a geologist turned military intelligence officer in 1917 who convinced the entire nomadic Bedou nation in the Sahara, modern day Syria, to overthrow the Ottoman Turks by taking Aqaba from the desert. Never been done before. And he did most of it through interpersonal skills, storytelling.
Yeah.
And then finally, the Verizon guy who realizes he has this obsession for connection, and he pops up here. Can you hear me now? Good.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now? And it's just this ability to build massive networks from the bottom up and amplify and connect and turn something tactical into something strategic.
Yeah.
All of that became a reality for me almost immediately putting on my Green Beret. I mean, I was put into missions as a young captain that frankly, I never in my wildest dreams thought I would have the opportunity to do in Central and South America. This was during the 90s, shortly after Pablo Escobar was killed. We were working in Colombia and other Andean ridge countries dealing with host nation militaries, but also dealing with the FARC and the narco terrorists as a captain, you know, and you're interacting with general officers in the Colombian military, with ambassadors, foreign ministers, and doing it in their target language. So for me, it was honest. And the best part, Mike, was being on the shoulders of these amazing NCOs, these sergeants who had spent their entire adult life doing this work. And you got to be at their shoulder and just work top cover for them to turn them loose to do what they did best. The Special Forces is an NCO sergeant-led organization. And as officers, I think we're there really to just hold space. Empower these amazing operators to do what they do. I loved there's a line in my play where Danny Patton, the character that I play, says, I loved every second when he looks at his beret. And that is absolutely true. Every second.
Yeah, that's cool, man. You know, I love this. One of the things that by becoming that, before you went into selection, that leader, that Simpkins, who put you in a place to where you're now surrounded by all these Green Berets, all these operators, right? You're now surrounded by the SF community, right? And there's the rising tide lifts all ships, right? And you're literally the average of the 5 people around you.
Yeah, that's true.
Is a big, big deal, because all of a sudden standards change, right? You go from logistics and supply and all that to now you're with the elite of the elite, and they're not going to take no for an answer. They're not going to take less than an absolute yes for an answer, right? This is standards. And everywhere you go, the standards seem to be going like this. They seem to be going up and up, right?
Yeah.
I love that. I love that about your journey, that as you're going, you're experiencing not only effective leadership, but world-class leadership. And then it's also benefiting you as you go forward. And now you're in a place where you can take that leadership that you've learned and you can apply it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give you a quick example. In 1998, I believe it was, my team, ODA 726, pretty senior team. The guys on my team were very senior. I was the most junior guy on the team, and I was the detachment commander. But my team sergeant had been in like 21 years, my warrant officer 19 years, my assistant team sergeant 17 years, all in 7th group, all in special.
We hope you enjoyed another episode of the Mike Litton Experience. If you did, do us a favor, smash that subscribe button, tell your friends, family, and coworkers about our program, and wherever you get your podcasts, please leave us a rating. It helps us to connect with quality people just like you.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. Reach out to Mike on Instagram at Litton Realty. Want to meet with Mike? Check out calendly.com/Rio760.